Tell me what your life was like before you died.
I was working at a station down in Santa Barbara, Station 11, and there was a flu epidemic going on. We had those bad flu years, and it was a good one, and it was filling up the hospitals and the emergency rooms. And we ran on one patient, and she had really gone far. She was circling the drain by the time we got to her, and we jumped into action. And I, with everything that we do, putting O2 on her and getting vitals, she exhaled and I inhaled, and I took her breath straight in. And I was like, oh man, I could feel her hot breath go down into my lungs. Everybody cringes when they think of that. And we got her to the hospital, and successful. She came home in a week or something. But a couple of days after I got that inoculation, I was really sick, and it came on pretty fast the next day, and just had this racing heart and this tanking blood pressure, and I was dehydrating, and before you knew it, I was circling the drain. And I called for help, and my department came, and a local ambulance company came, and they picked me up, got me in an ambulance, got some IVs started because I was severely dehydrated, and got me to the local hospital. And the place was full of people, full of kids, full of adults, people suffering from this flu. And they put me in a room, and they were kind of overwhelmed. And they came in and gave me something. They injected it into the IV port, the injection port on the IV line. And the girls, she's a great nurse, but they were flustered. And so she pushed it in like all the way in. And my wife was there, and she said, your eyes rolled back and you just keeled over straight back, and you were gone, and they couldn't get you back, and they could barely get a blood pressure. So I didn't come back, and they put me into intensive care with a couple of IVs and head down, and I just kind of hovered there at a blood pressure that was like 40/0 for hours. And at some point during that night, 2, 3 in the morning, something like that, I left my body. What I found myself in a star-filled realm. It was just all of these stars, these colorful orbs. I was parading through them, and it was all good vibes and beautiful stars, orbs, I guess we call them. And it was a complete ecstasy. It was complete euphoria. It felt like I'd been let out of a hot, dark, stuffy closet, and I'd been stuck there. And I was now this huge expanded cloud just sailing through this welcoming party of stars. And I felt like somebody was pouring honey all over my brain, and it was running down through all my nerves, and it was like a cosmic orgasm, and it just kept going. It was just this standing wave of absolute euphoria. And I was thinking, man, that was rough duty. That place was gnarly, this earth. And all those things, like those low emotions like anger and jealousy and rage, those things didn't exist. It was just pure, delightful existence. And as I flew along through all these stars, I was thinking, how in the world did I forget who I really was? How is it that I was absolutely convinced, immersed in this dude that I was pretending to be? This Bill Letson. And he had this whole story, and he had his likes and dislikes, and he had, all this stuff, and all of it was pretend. It was like just something I was doing, like a game. And I didn't want, going back to that was out of the question. There's no way. I was free, and I was absolutely stoked. So I flew along for a while, and everything was awesome. And it's like this, the moment is constantly the same thing of, oh wow, this is so cool. Everything is new and absolutely stoked in each moment. So I was flying along, just could do this forever. This is awesome. And then I landed in a place that was solid. There was indirect lighting, there was equipment there were beds, it was a solid place. And right in front of me were 3 beings. And they were these short little hooded guys with big smiles on their face, and they were bouncing around and giggling, and I was trying to sort out, well, where am I now? This was complete change in everything. It was it was in a structure, and they were looking at me, and they were giggling, and they were saying things like, how was it? What did you learn? What can you tell us? And I was just kind of looking at them like, where is it? What is this place? And you guys are very strange looking. And they looked exactly like that, those guys in the movie Communion, where Christopher Walken goes in, and there's a lot of people when they see that, they see demons or something, but they weren't. They were just these cool little munchkins, and they were giggling and they were happy to see me. And if you watch that movie Communion, they're actually pretty playful, joyful guys. They don't do anything that is really upsetting once Christopher Walken controls his fear of the situation. Once he gets used to, this is something phenomenal, but it's not menacing. So one of them came forward and looked me up and down, and he turned to the other two and he goes, "He doesn't remember us." And they started giggling uproariously, bouncing around and stuff. And I was like, "Guys, I kind of remember you, but this is very unusual here." And then there was this other guy, and he was in the background at first. He was this tall, wispy guy, and he had this I've called him like a trimmed up Gumby and like a walking stick. And he had this huge smile on his face. His eyes were bright, and he was absolutely stoked. You could feel the love coming off of him towards me. And he had this weird spinning energy, like you were, like if you took a glass of water and spun it and then looked at the vortex there, the spinning. That's what he looked like. And it looked like when he came forward, it was like I was looking at somebody underwater, and the top part would move first and then the other parts would sort of catch up, and then he'd become whole again, and he kept moving. And as he came closer, I just felt my chest just expanding and my throat tightening, and I felt like I was going to break down in uncontrollable crying from love. There was so much love coming from this being that it was paralyzing. It was overwhelming. And we went back and forth with some different small talk stuff. And every time I said anything, he just chuckled. He just would crack up like he was looking at a little toddler and he was amused by his little toddler. After a while, the little guys were just giggling and he was just chuckling at everything. And I said, well, there's not, this isn't very organized. There's not much going on. Do we go and make do a review of my life? Is that what's next? Do you guys want to get started with that? And the tall, wispy guy just cracked up. He was just chuckling, and he thought that was hysterical that this little toddler was, trying to take over. But he said, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? And so I told a few stories about, jobs that my wife and I got offered a job off the coast of California on this island. And I took a fire job, but she really wanted that. And she said, when are we going to get a chance to live on an island by ourselves? But I was, 20, 22, something. I said, I'm not going to do well alone on an island at this age. And I need action. I need to be around fire guys. Yeah, but now that I'm almost 70, I look back and I say, I wish I had done that for her because she wanted it. And she's pretty cool. So I talked for a while. I told a couple of different things. Nobody was listening. They weren't paying attention. They were doing the same thing. They were doing these playful, joyful things with each other and a lot of chuckling and giggling. And then he just turns to me and he goes, "Okay, that's enough. Time to go back." And that floored me. That I was shocked at that. And I was like, go back? I go, no way. I cannot go back there. That you don't understand. That place is rough duty. And he's like, no, you got to go back. You got things to do and you're going back. As he came forward, I pleaded. I told him I was almost 40. What good am I? My life's pretty much over. There's not much I can do after 40, And he laughed at that, just like you. And I said some other things. I said, hey, I got lots of friends, lots of bros, but the only people that are really going to get stung by me not coming back is my wife and my parents. But they are strong people. They will persevere. And he thought that was funny. And he said, okay, now you're going back. And he came forward and the place just started to break up. It started to dematerialize. He evaporated in front of me and the room came apart and I dropped in frequency and I dropped away and I was on my way to another channel, another dimension, another stop. And it was a drop in frequency. It didn't feel good as I was moving back this place. And I got close to my body and it was a dark place. It was lonely. It was dismal, and you didn't want to be there. We talk about heaven and in between place and earth and then another place. From that experience, I believe that other place is right close to where we are here in the physical. I think that's part of our thing where we need to navigate that successfully when we come out of our bodies. That whole thing about the valley of the shadow of death. without fear, we have to move through that into the higher planes. But anyway, I was back in my body, and I woke up a few times, 4 or 5 in the morning, and I was looking at the equipment, and it was the vital signs, the things were improving with each round, and they take your vitals, and I could stay awake after a while. It was still dark out, and I was looking around, and the nurse came by, and she was shocked. She's like, "You're awake?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am. I need to talk to you." And she said, "Well, I need to go tell a doctor. We've been worried all night. We didn't know what was going on with you, where this was going." And I said, "Okay, you can go get the doctor, but first, what am I doing back here?" I was pissed, and I wanted to verbalize that, I guess. And I said, I was home with my best bros. I was back where I belong. I had died. I had bought the farm. I was sure of it. And she had her hands on my shoulders, and she was saying, "He's just old nurse, seen it all." And she goes, "Honey, you've been in escrow, and you fell out of escrow, and now you're back with us, and you're going to have to get your head around that." And she said it very genuinely. She sort of spoke to my soul, and I never forgot that, because I had just come back from this experience in this illusionary, this journey. But, and then everybody came by, and I was just la 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 blah 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 blah, the big guy, the tall guy, the little guys, and they were my best friends. And it was like I just got off a roller coaster, and they wanted to know what it was about. And you see disappointment in your family's faces, and the doctor tells you outright, you're crazy. And so I was home for a few days, and then recovering, and then I got back to work, and the guys all wanted to know. It's like, "Hey, dude, something happened to you. Everyone's talking about it." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'll tell you what happened." And I didn't leave anything out. The very religious guys, they didn't want to hear much more of the story once I got to the short little guys, because it wasn't fitting their robes and harps and beards, and I always thought that was really interesting, because they were such good people, but they wanted nothing to do with this sort of unusual story. And so I told the story for a while, and then the word kind of leaked down from the office, "Hey, you better stop telling that story, because we don't have kooks riding our fire engines." And that made sense. So yeah, it's that, and it's all those other things. The ultimate purpose of life is to be kind and to help others. And when your parents get old, drop everything you want to do, even though you're young and healthy, and be there for them. Most of us don't. My mom went through this place, and there was 80 people in there, and I was the only one that was there every day. They'd come on the weekends or holidays and stuff, but walk your ancestors home. And, we're programmed to believe that we are, that is something has value, then it has monetary value. And if you sell a lot of it, then you're a bestseller, and now you have more value. And I stay away from it. I stay away from any bucks coming my way. And, Jesus, there's only one time Jesus got pissed off, and he went back to Jerusalem with his followers, went into the temple, and there was all this stuff, people selling things, and he flipped out. He turned the tables over, and, he lost his cool, because there was money changers in the temple. We're not supposed to be doing this. This life here on earth is a temporary gig. It's over in a few heartbeats, out of the illusion of this world and back to who you really are.